Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you and welcome to COTE 2021. Before we start, I'd like you to indulge me as we play the national anthem. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. As we start today's proceedings, I am Dr. Mohammed, Head Department of Economics, and I will be hosting the session going forward. So first of all, let me do the protocols. Dr. Akola Lewis Cameron, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Professors Emeritus, Deputy Deans, Dr. Wendell Wallace, Dr. Mina Rambukas, Dr. Bani Pacheco, and Dr. Karine and Nathaniel Decaries. Also with us, Dr. Talia Esnad, Head Department of Behavioral Sciences, Dr. Shelley-Ann Wilson, Head Department of Management Studies, Dr. Charlene Roach, Head Department of Political Sciences. Also, colleagues from the Cave Hill and Mona campus. Sponsor representatives from First Citizens Bank, Unit Trust Corporation, the Inter-American Development Bank, CAF Development Bank, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and Republic Bank Limited. Other specially invited guests, conference presenters, faculty colleagues, UWI students, secondary school students and their teachers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my immense pleasure to warmly welcome you to the 15th Annual Conference of the Economy. This conference continues to be the department's main form of outreach to both the national and regional community, and has become a landmark event on the university's calendar. For persons joining us for the first time, I would like to mention that the Conference on the Economy was conceptualized in 2007. The name was conceived by Mr. Gregory Maguire, which is COTE, Conference of the Economy, all of which was done under the leadership of the late Professor Dennis Pantin. At that time, COTE was seen as a vehicle for the Department of Economics to engage the wider community in areas of economics and development. Since its inception, I am happy to say that the conference has grown and has evolved to where it is recognized both locally and regionally as the forum that provides rich interface between academia and practitioners in economics and other related fields. Today, COTE targets students, academics, technocrats, the business community, policymakers, non-governmental organizations, as well as the general public. I can proudly say that I have served on the COTE team since its inception, first as a PhD student and later on as a member of staff. COTE has always encouraged every category of students to participate in its event. In fact, COTE youth events have covered such topics as economic diversification, health and development, sustainable growth, gender and development, as well as trade and development. Last year, during the ongoing pandemic, the conference addressed issues relating to COVID-19. As the pandemic continues and building on the issues addressed at last year's conference, the theme of COTE 2021 is Accelerating Caribbean Development, Retooling and Restructuring Caribbean Economies Post-COVID-19. This year, the COTE Youth pre-conference events deserve a special mention. The COTE Youth Armchair discussion was held last October 14th, and the COTE debates were held on October 21st and November 11th. They have been successful in engaging both our undergraduate students and secondary school students on issues pertaining to them and nurturing an interest in the economic issues facing our society. At this point, we would like to give a special thanks to the sponsors and the Economics Student Society for continuing to give their support to these initiatives. I also wish to place on record the appreciation of the Department of Economics for the continued support received from the Ministry of Education. This year, COTE focuses on several sectors, including the manufacturing sector, the agriculture and agribusiness sector, the cultural sector, the blue economy, as well as the energy and renewable energy sectors. And we will discuss the role of these sectors in a post-COVID Caribbean. One of the features of this year's COTE will be the armchair discussion on the report of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy. This discussion will be led by the Commissioner's Chairman, Professor Avinash Prasad, and will feature members of the CARICOM Commission. Good for us is that the findings of the report will be presented during this session. With these words, I once again warmly welcome you to this year's conference. On behalf of the staff of the Department of Economics, and as well as my own behalf, I trust that the time spent at this conference will be beneficial to all present and will help us to chart the way in understanding our realities and discovering solutions to assist in accelerating Caribbean development, retooling and restructuring Caribbean economies post-COVID-19. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Dr. Akola Lewis Cameron, Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, to bring greetings. Dean.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. I would like to warmly welcome with us this afternoon members of the Diplomatic Corps, colleagues here at the St. Augustine campus and other UWI campuses, our sponsors, our specially invited guests, of course, our presenters, our UE students, other students, and of course, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to be with you for COTE 2021 under the theme, Accelerating Caribbean Development, Retooling and Restructuring Caribbean Economies Post-COVID-19. As a nation and a region, we continue to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic and all the socioeconomic uncertainties attached to it. Certainly, we all would have hoped to be at a much better place at this point. But even as I speak, Trinidad and Tobago is now battling its third wave with increasing COVID-19 cases and deaths. As a faculty and university, we sympathize with those who have lost loved ones to this virus and continue to pray for an improvement in the situation. We have heard it said that COVID-19 is here with us for quite a while, and therefore we must learn how to live with it in our midst. And part of learning to live with it is navigating the socioeconomic issues that have increased because of the global pandemic and leveraging new opportunities that have also presented themselves. Indeed, these discussions have been occurring with solutions forthcoming. However, because of the volatility of the situation, societal minds must continue to come together to formulate adaptable, flexible, and relevant solutions to constantly changing circumstances. And so I want to applaud the Department of Economics for its second iteration of a virtual COTE during this pandemic and its commitment to continue much needed discussions on the way forward. Last year's COTE 2020 focused on the theme, Crisis is Opportunity, and we took courage through examples of international and regional resilience. A year later, we reflect on what is required to accelerate recovery, growth, and build further resilience to future shocks. I was heartened to hear recent reports from the World Travel and Tourism Council, which indicate that the Caribbean's travel and tourism sector, the predominant sector of this region, is recovering faster than any other region in the world. And so the Caribbean remains the most tourism-dependent economy globally, evidenced by the economic devastation caused by this pandemic. However, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank states that the protracted pandemic continues to cause significant hardship, particularly among the most vulnerable groups, such as households and small businesses. And this has led the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union members to reiterate their appeal to the international community for additional financing to help them provide income support to citizens and these small businesses most affected by the fallout of the pandemic. And so these realities point to more urgent and action-oriented discussions on diversification. I believe that you would agree with me that we are long past the season of lip service to this idea of Caribbean economic diversification. While tourism will remain an important economic earner for most Caribbean economies, and the energy sector a core income earner for Trinidad and Tobago, we must step into a post-COVID period well prepared as to where we need to focus public sector policies and investments. This year, I am happy that talks seem to explore opportunities in the blue economy, the creative industries, manufacturing, and agriculture to build sustainable livelihoods. At the Faculty of Social Sciences and by extension, the UWI, we remain deeply committed to working with our various stakeholders to develop implementable solutions to these socioeconomic issues. We understand that as a learning and research institution, we must also employ a multi-pronged response to current and future crises, which undoubtedly involves a rethink of our production-oriented curricula, a rethink of our learning designs, our teaching, and our assessment approaches. And we will continue to produce individuals who will think and act differently and foster innovation in this ever-changing environment for the positive transformation of Caribbean economies. We continue to be socially engaged and solutions-oriented and seek to consistently bring all stakeholders to the table so that we can leverage on collaborative thinking. Yet for another year, COTE provides this opportunity for us to gather on common ground with the common purpose of extracting thoughts and ideas of how we can retool, restructure, and most importantly, experience enhanced development and growth as Caribbean nationals. I warmly welcome all our presenters and participants to a very dynamic round of discussions and trust that these discussions will yield tangible and positive impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I expect that you would have a very productive time at this conference on the economy 2021. All the best in your deliberations over the next 2 days. Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Dean, for your greetings and warm welcome. It was really appreciated and sets the stage for the next 3 days of the conference. Before we start the proceedings, I would like to have us all look at some sponsors, some sponsorship advertisements.
Stop your bow, Mr. Fiddler. Oh, hi. This country so colorful and truly diverse. We're doing our best to put TNT first. Youth success through advancement, we encourage. We proudly supporting the rich cultural heritage, promoting development in the sporting arena, and empowering women for equality of gender. We sustaining the environment and strengthening the society. First citizens helping paint a brighter TNT. Drag your bow, Mr. Fiddler.
Some of the most special things in life take time to come to fruition. And when they do, the rewards can enrich lives for generations to come. The wait is so worth it. Contact the UTC today and get growing.
At the Inter-American Development Bank in Trinidad and Tobago, we are proud to have a diverse team of professionals representing various disciplines and nationalities who work collaboratively with local stakeholders to improve the lives of citizens in TNT. The IDB Group consists of 3 windows. IDB Lab, which supports the development of innovative micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. IDB Invest, which provides loans to larger private sector entities for development initiatives. And IDB, which engages with the government to implement strategic priorities by providing loans, technical assistance, research, and advice. Please take the time to learn more about our work, jobs at the IDB Group, events, and financing opportunities by following @CNCoburnRepTT on social media.
In the blink of an eye, the world changed forever.
El gobierno dará a conocer en las próximas horas una serie de medidas sanitarias y económicas para seguir enfrentando la pandemia.
Una reunión con el presidente y el jefe de gobierno.
A global crisis of unprecedented proportions, from which no country has escaped. In Latin America, we have faced many challenging times, some more difficult than others. But today, we all understand that solidarity is our biggest strength. "50 years ago, CAF was created with a mission. 5 Andean countries united to promote sustainable development and regional integration, thus improving quality of life and boosting productivity. Today, we are composed by 19 countries and account for over 600 million people. And despite the distance and the barriers that separate us, we must work more united than ever, because only together we will succeed. The world will not be the same, but now we have the opportunity to build an even better one, a more harmonious, cleaner, and efficient planet. And for the challenges that lie ahead, at CAF, we want to say 3 words. Here we are. To build together a region of opportunities, especially for the most vulnerable ones, with infrastructure that improves quality of life and increases connectivity. A region of vibrant cities, of entrepreneurs and businesses committed to their communities, of societies respectful with the natural world that we all share and must care for. At CAF, we have walked along a region for 50 years on its road to progress. Now more than ever, here we are. And here we will remain, firm in our commitment of being the Development Bank of Latin America.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We share it. We use it to live better, longer, smarter, to manifest a future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways that can enrich life for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
And those were some words from our sponsors. We thank them for partnering with us, because without their help, this would not have been possible. I would now like to start session 1. And session 1 is our virtual armchair on the CARICOM Commission's report. It will be chaired by our very own Dr. Darren Conrad. Darren is a lecturer in the Department of Economics. He earned his Bachelor's of Arts, Master's of Arts, and PhD in Economics from the Howard University. He served as an assistant professor at Bowie State University and as an adjunct lecturer at Howard University School of Business. Dr. Conrad has published in numerous international scholarly journals. His research interests are in the areas of development economics, urban economics, and monetary and fiscal economics. So let me welcome Dr. Conrad to take the floor. Dr. Conrad?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Good afternoon to all of the members of the viewing audience, those participants, registrants. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And of course, to kickstart the COTE conference on the economy 2021, Accelerating Caribbean Development, Retooling and Restructuring Caribbean Economies Post-COVID-19, we start off with our armchair discussion this afternoon. The armchair discussion would be a review and some more in-depth discussion of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy report that came out, Caribbean 9.58, Speeding Up the Caribbean. This afternoon on the in the armchair discussion, we are joined by the chairman of the Commission on the Economy, CARICOM Commission on the Economy, Professor Avinash Prasad, as well as one of the commissioners, Mr. Gregory Maguire, who will be joining us as well. Unfortunately, we must apologize for Honorable Chester Humphrey, who will not be able to join us this afternoon, unforeseen circumstances. But gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to you both, and welcome to everyone to, again, COTE 2021. I will first introduce the two presenters this afternoon. They will then go ahead and present for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll delve into some more discussion and of course fielding some questions from the audience as well. We'll get some more insight on this 12-point action plan, the COVID-19 declaration and call to action by the Commission, the CARICOM Commission on the Economy. So I'll introduce them and they'll be presenting in the order on the program, Professor Avinash first and followed by Mr. Gregory Maguire. So let me introduce both of them. Professor Avinash Prasad, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Professor Prasad. Good afternoon. Thank you. Professor Prasad career spreads unusually across academia, public policy, and international finance. He is a former governor of the London School of Economics and 2021 president of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. He was elected trustee of the Global Association of Risk Professionals and the Royal Economic Society of Great Britain. He won the Jacques de la Rosière Award in Global Finance from the Institute of International Finance and was voted one of the top 3 public intellectuals in the world on the Financial Crisis by an expert panel. He's Emeritus Professor of Gresham College in the UK. Described as a policy entrepreneur, he was chairman of Regulatory Subcommittee of the UN Commission on Financial Reform, chairman of Warwick Commission on Financial Reform, chairman Financial Services Commission of Barbados, member of the UK Treasury's Audit and Risk Committee and the Pew Task Force to the US Senate Banking Committee, visiting scholar at the IMF, distinguished advisor, Financial Sector Law Reform Commission of India, and currently chairman, CARICOM Commission on the Economy. Good afternoon again, Professor, and thank you for joining us. And of course, no stranger to COTE, having joined us prior as one of our keynote presenters. Nice to see you again. Looking good.
Thank you.
And of course, we have our very own Mr. Gregory Maguire, who is a principal consultant at DSL Consultants Limited. We can call him the father of the name COTE under the form of Professor Panton. Gregory Maguire was the one who was pretty much came up with the name COTE as far as records can show. Executive chairman of ACES, Caribbean Energy Specialist, a director at the Eco-Industrial Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago, and a member of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Climate Change Center. Mr. Maguire recently served as a subcommittee chair on the Prime Minister's Roadmap to Recovery team and is also a member of the CARICOM Economic Commission. A graduate of the University of the West Indies, he holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in economics with a specialization in petroleum economics. He holds a registered commercial gas consultant and diploma in natural gas industry management from Oxford College of Petroleum Studies. In the field of strategy management, Mr. Maguire is a Kaplan Norton Balanced Scorecard certified graduate and a certified graduate of the PRO-SCI change management process. Mr. Maguire has a distinguished career in business spanning 35 years. Good afternoon, Mr. Maguire, and thank you also for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasant good afternoon to you, Darren, Conrad, and good afternoon to all viewers.
Thank you. And so we will start with Professor Prasad. Professor Prasad, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. And Gregory and I don't want to give you long speeches. We really do want to have a armchair discussion. Right. But let me maybe kick off by giving you a bit of context and some of our sort of summary conclusions. What is development? We think development is giving our people the ability to live the life they choose to lead. So we're not going to be prescriptive about what life that is. It's the life they choose to lead. And that life may not be necessarily a high-powered, high-wage life. Development is about this choice that they have to decide. Many people don't have a choice about the life they live. They are forced into a narrow set of choices if choices exist at all. And so development is about allowing us and our kids to be able to be anything they want to be. And so I think that's partly about GDP, but you can see GDP is not the focus of our commission. It's partly about how you organize your society. Now, when we began as independent states in the 60s and 70s, we had a terrific 2 decades. We were the fastest growing region in the world. And then around the mid to late 1980s, we began to slow. Maybe it was because we had the initial catch up and initial returns of great investment returns from investing heavily in public education. I think all people in the Caribbean sort of almost know by instinct that famous dictum by one of our most famous economists, Sir Arthur Lewis, that the solution to poverty is not money, it is knowledge. And so we invested heavily in education. But from the mid to late 1980s, we began to slip. We began to underperform. Initially, we thought what was really happening was that other people were just catching up. Other regions of the world, take Latin America. Latin America was beset with a number of autocratic, dictatorial regimes They went from debt crisis to debt crisis, and then by the late 1980s, they're recovering. So maybe what's happening was that we weren't slowing down, but others were catching up. But by the 90s, by the first decade of this century, we began to slow even more. Of course, the commodity exporters like Trinidad had a slightly different trajectory, but on average, as a region, we have now become the slowest growing region in the world. So how do we go from being one of the fastest to one of the slowest? We need to refreshen our economic model. We need to recognize that education is vital. And of course, we need to modernize what education means. It's not just what happens in school. It's not just what happens at university, but it's also a lot of learning by doing. But clearly, that's not enough. I think we've learned that ownership, opportunity, these things remain critical even after we've invested heavily in education. So that's our fundamental view as commissioners. The commission, we were lucky to be able to drag Gregory, who's a very busy man, as you all know, to join us on the commission. We had another well-known Trinidadian academic, Roger McLean, on the commission. We had some eminent international scholars in the world of development and trade, because we know that as a collection of small island states, trade is going to be important. Pascal Lamy, the former Director General of the World Trade Organization, was a member of our commission, as was the current Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. We also had Senator Chester Humphrey. We had another UE academic in the economics department, Damien King. We had Therese Turner-Jones and Wendell Samuels and myself. So the first thing that we began doing as commissioners was, the first question in our mind was not what is development, what are we going to propose? It's why did all the other commission reports fail to make a difference? Because we didn't want to be just another one of those reports collecting dust on somebody's shelf. You know, if you look at the last one, chaired by Sir Stuart Ramphal, beautifully written, fantastic ideas, got a great applause. They spent a lot of time, they were lucky there wasn't COVID. They spent a fair bit of time engaging with the public about their findings. And we've tried to do the best we can digitally over the past year. But really, we have not followed those recommendations. And that wasn't the first time we as a region have not followed the assembled wisdom of our wise men and women. So we asked, you know, how do we make sure we don't fail again? And so we spent some time thinking about what went wrong. And we decided there were really three things. The first one is that the popular narrative about CARICOM, and the minute I mention the word CARICOM, this popular narrative is feeding people through people's minds of countries squabbling and never agree. That's actually not the reality. Our problem is that we have required unanimity. And what often happens in CARICOM on the major economic issues is that you may well get 12 people agreeing, even 13, sometimes 14, but just not 15. And so we decided to address that issue with something called enhanced cooperation. So like typically of economists, we're always trying to say that the solution lies not with us, but with someone else. It's not an economic issue, it's a governance issue. So we began by saying, that let's have enhanced cooperation. What that means is that if a minimum of 5 countries agree to move ahead on something, and the other 10 have been satisfied that those 5 moving ahead does not cause them a disadvantage, the 5 can move ahead. We think this was well received within the heads of government, and we think this will make an important difference in unsticking CARICOM. The second problem that CARICOM has is that CARICOM tries to do too many things. The problem with regional integration is that you have people who believe that everything we do should be regionally done, and people who believe that nothing we do should be regionally done. I've come across groups who are working to see whether there should be a common drinking age across the entire CARICOM. I mean, why? So we introduced something else called subsidiarity. So it was a decision should be made at the closest level in which is efficient for that decision to be made, the closest level to the people. So you do not want CARICOM in Georgetown deciding what day of the week your garbage will be collected. But you may want CARICOM to be thinking about things of regional security, of regional trade, of regional transport. So subsidiarity is saying, look, there's some things best done by CARICOM, and there's some things that are not. They're best done by countries, best done by a couple countries, best done by within countries, cities. So subsidiarity was another key decision of ours. A third thing is that CARICOM often squabbles, when it does squabble, over money. Now, let's face it, most people squabble over money. So this isn't just a CARICOM problem. So what we try to do in our report is to point out that we can do an awful lot without money. We can unstick the region without money. So we disciplined ourselves to come up with recommendations that would cost nobody any money. So subsidiarity, enhanced cooperation, and things we can do without money. Those are the sort of overarching themes of our commission report. And just to give you a flavor of what those things are, before I ask Gregory maybe to drill down on some of the aspects of the report that he found particularly personal to him. We have a transport problem. We are the most expensive region in the world to move things around. Imagine if in the future, somebody in Barbados, say, could call up at 4 p.m. a Trinidadian furniture manufacturer, and at 8 a.m., that piece of furniture they have ordered and paid for online is being put on a fast ferry on the way to Barbados to be collected that day. So I can order something in Trinidad and it arrives the following day. Imagine here I am in Barbados and I can order a basket of the most amazing fruits from Dominica and it arrives the next day. We don't have daily fast ferries across the region. We have weekly expensive ferries. Now, does that require money? What is stopping fast ferries operating in the region? And very few people understand fast ferries as well as Trinidadians do because of the Port of Spain Tobago route. Because we're not talking about little ferries that you might go from places between the island chain. You need some pretty heavy duty cats. These are boats that cost between $70 million to more. And but they can make economic sense on their own without government if they're able to carry cargo as well as people, cars as well as people and cargo. And all of that requires agreements at customs and ports that allows the ferry to come in, drop its cargo, pick up some more cargo and move on. So that's an agreement required. And if we can get 5 countries to get an agreement, that Trinidadians can take their cars to Grenada, drive around for a week and come back again, without the Grenadians saying, oh, you're importing a car, you need to pay 125% duty, in which case nobody's going to travel. So those are agreements we can do. So that's one of the key things we talked about. Another one, of course, is greater mobility of people. The CARICOM the mobility of people, the skilled national regime is a clunky, hard to process regime. We're saying that people should be allowed to work in other countries as long as they have a minimum of 2 CXCs. And all they need to do is have evidence that they've got 2 CXCs on a blockchain certificate that they carry on their phone, and the immigration officer will accept that. They don't need to get approval in each country and send in tons of forms, etc. So we want greater mobility of people. Now, 2 CXCs may sound low for you guys in Trinidad, but the sad reality is the majority of our school leavers are leaving without 2 CXCs. Now, the future is that people are working in different countries, different islands, maybe even different continents, without actually moving. So we also talked about creating a new type of digital employment, where you could be employing people in Barbados as a Trinidadian company. And you have a digital employment contract, which makes it very clear where you are making their social security contributions, where you are paying their taxes, and where they're paying their taxes. At the moment, they would operate as a bit of an external consultant without being part of the social security system. We believe finding a way to modernize social security in this new world, in which people are not necessarily working with one employer anymore in a physical way, is very important. And let me end with another of our ideas, and there are a few others, but I've spoken for far too long. It's time for us to hear Gregory. Climate change is a big issue. We're on the front line of climate change. You may have heard Prime Minister Motley talk about that at the COP26. The front line is between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. That is where sea levels will increase the most, temperatures will be the most onerous. The combination of the two will create wetter storms, also greater droughts, and we will be suffering from that. We need more investment. The challenge is there's a lot of money in our region. There's a lot of money internationally looking to invest in things. We have something like $100 billion in the region. How do we mobilize investment to help us become more resilient and to adapt to a changing climate? We think one of the things is that investors, especially those abroad who say they want to invest in resilience, they don't have good metrics and good measurements as to whether these investments are indeed going to make a difference to resilience, whether this resilient investment fits in with other resilient investments and contributes to a resilient country. And so we're recommending that there is an agency, and the agency can have the right to do this, and they can bid for the right to do it. So it's not a lot of government money either, which rates projects by how much they impact the resilience of a country. We also need ratings to be done perhaps globally, regionally, on things like anti-money laundering and fit and proper people. Capital does not move across our region. Trinidad has a tremendous amount of capital. It is the region's headquarters of capital. Your capital is blocked in moving across the region because of a whole range of apparently fiduciary type regulations. And we think there should be one place that you go, you get a fit and proper certificate, you get an anti-money laundering certificate, and you can take that certificate and travel anywhere in the region for 6 months and be allowed to operate with that certificate. So that is one of our other recommendations. Let me conclude with those recommendations there and say that we believe we need to change the governance. We need to speed up the Caribbean. We need to have more enhanced cooperation, more subsidiarity, that there are few key plumbing things like transport and mobility of people, mobility of finance and capital, and mobility of contracts that are required as we move along to a more developed region, a region where our people are able to export and share their ideas and their creativity, their intellectual abilities down a broadband connection to the world. And that's the future of a prosperous Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Gregory, as Prof turned it over to you for you to give us some more in-depth insight.
Yes, yeah, I would just have a few words to say. I mean, Prof has covered a lot of the major recommendations of the report. But I think that I want to just point to two further things and to reinforce a couple of things that he said. In particular, I want to point to the whole issue of climate change, the energy transition, and the need, the report speaks about the need to move rapidly towards alternative energy, to the renewables, taking advantage, of course, of our climate, and to open the channels for the growth of renewables across the region. As you know, the region in pre-COVID, during COVID, suffers from serious foreign exchange leakage as a result of the energy costs. Outside of Guyana and south of Trinidad and now Guyana, the region is very dependent on fossil fuels, and it's in our interests, we felt, that we move rapidly and speedily towards that. There are a couple of constraints, of course, issues around the tariffs and the cost of alternative energy, but the experience has shown, of course, that those who bear these costs upfront will move much faster in terms of engaging the private sector to make that transition and to install the renewable energy capacity that these countries need. It's just a sacrifice that we have to make in the short term for our benefit longer term. We enjoyed a period of pretty low oil prices and therefore lower energy costs for a bit, but now that you see that the world is cranking back up and economies are opening up, notwithstanding the continued rise of COVID, we also see serious escalation in the cost of gasoline and energy in general. You would have heard up to last night, I think I heard the news that the US is planning to release their strategic stocks so that they could force down boost supply and therefore force down the oil prices that keep rising. So that's one thing that I think we said that the region needs to look at seriously. The other thing is that the whole question of digital transformation. And in fact, there's an interesting proposal in the report. It's in the section on I think the section is called Adjusting to CARICOM. I think the 20, is it 10 or 20 points, adjusting to COVID, sorry. And the interesting proposal inside of there called building that single CARICOM digital library with for all training, of all learning resources. So we've learned during COVID that our children have had to and are still doing online schooling. And it was felt here as an excellent opportunity for us to develop Caribbean content to facilitate that online learning. And that such an initiative will call for and will call out and call into action all the creatives that we have across the region who can be engaged in what was idle time. I mean, creative people are now beginning to move back out, and those who can earn a living outside the region have all gone out. But nonetheless, it was the opportunity and still is an opportunity to engage a lot of these people in the creation of learning resources, and learning resources that focuses on the Caribbean. Part of the problem we all have and have had, and many of us grew up with it. We grew up with a colonial education. We grew up learning more about what's happening in North America and what's happening in Grenada. You know, up to this morning, someone was telling me about the wonders of Dominica and wanting to go live in Dominica because when you ask Dominican people, well, you know, what's the crime rate like? And they'd say, well, crime, like, what is that? The point is that there are islands and there are places that we need to learn more about as a people, and COVID and the whole digital transformation that we've been forced to embark on has now created further opportunity for creating new resources, learning resources that speaks to the Caribbean space and at the same time helps us to boost the income and the livelihoods of all our creative people. So I just want to leave it right there because we don't want to take up too much time with us talking. I believe far more can come out of the questioning session. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you so much. And of course, that is where the meat of the matter is in terms of hearing from the audience and answering those questions and engaging. So we're looking forward to the audience participation. You can send your questions to us through the chat, and we will definitely present those questions to either to Prof and to Gregory so that we can have a discussion going. But while we wait on these questions to come in, listening to Prof and listening to Gregory in terms of the whole CARICOM and the commission, it is really heartening because I like the fact that the starting point was, why didn't the other reports work? And I think that is very encouraging because, you know, the average young person now, you ask them about CARICOM and they might be a bit sidelined. They might not know exactly what we're talking about. So that's a good place to start. And also, I noted in the report that there was mention that, you know, this is a last chance to act before the lateness of the hour dims the possibilities. But it was also tempered by the following statement in the sentence where it said, it's not a matter about being pessimistic, it's a matter about being impatient in terms of what can be done. Now I ask you this, and I hear about some of the plumbing issues and things that need to be done in the short term that is not going to cost anything to unstick the CARICOM agenda. What I wanted to find out, there was a book chapter by Patsy Lewis that spoke to some of the problems in CARICOM in the countries is the structure, the fundamental structure of the economies and how they differ. And that might pose problems or challenges in terms of how countries may agree on one item or not. So do you think that the structure of the economic system in the Caribbean is a limitation? And if it is, are there things that can be done to mitigate some of the differences that might come out of the different structures that exist?
Well, you know, we appear from the outside to be quite similar. So that we have a bunch of coral-based or small island who are very tourism-based, very travel and tourism-based. And then we have some big commodity linked countries, Jamaica, Trinidad, in the future, clearly Guyana, Suriname. But you know, Paul Krugman won his Nobel Prize in economics for pointing out that France and Germany make the same things and trade heavily with each other. So the French buy German cars and the Germans buy French cars. And so just the fact that we have these structures that might not appear to be conducive to trade, the evidence is that consumers have different tastes. And although, you know, Trinidad has some of the world's greatest food and music, that doesn't mean to say you can't enjoy music from abroad as well, and different foods from abroad. So I think that I'm less sure that those structures matter. I'm more sure, let me end with this point, and it really feeds a bit off something that Gregory mentioned, which I think is very important. It also connects with people who you call them young people, or people who have seen a different kind of world economy than we grew up with. The future of the world is probably going to be based around 5 or less major digital platforms. The world economy is no longer about ports and roads. It's about digital platforms. And the 5 biggest tech firms in the world, the Microsofts and Facebooks and Googles, they are more dominant in this world today than the 7 sisters who were dominant in the oil industry. And so the development question for our people is, how are our people going to be positioned on these platforms in positions of power and not positions of submissiveness? We need to be producers and not just consumers. And how do we do that? It's going to be very hard unless we have regional procurement. Let me give you an example. The National Insurance Scheme of Barbados has spent around $150 million over the past 4 or 5 years on software. The kind of software they needed, there was no one in Barbados that could have done that software. So they went abroad. Imagine if we had regional procurement, times that by all the social security systems around our region. This potentially a $1 billion market in social security software that our people could have been designing to give them the skills and ability to compete on these 5 massive global platforms of the future. So that's where having CARICOM and operating in a regional market and regional procurement can actually be a huge beneficiary. And the fact that you have bees and we have bees, and we have a squabble over whose bees can go where, I think we can surmount that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gregory. Gregory, your mic is muted.
Yes. I just want to add, Darren, that I think diversity could also be our strength. You know, the problem is putting our heads together and believing ourselves as Caribbean people and putting our heads together. And I hear Avinash talking about these things, and it throws me back to way back in 1968, the dynamics of West Indian integration, and that wonderful book that looked at the strengths of the various islands and the resources and said how we could bring them all together. Guyana lumber, Jamaica bauxite, Trinidad gas, and so on and so on. So 40 years down the road, we're still having the same kind of conversation. The second thing that I think that has kept us back from moving together is that what Lloyd Best used to call self-contempt. We just don't believe that we could do it. And that still is there with us. So we won't look to the guy in Trinidad, and even the guy in Trinidad, we won't look to him. We rather take somebody outside and so on. So, you know, how do we get over those things? And we have to start again by the mind of the mind. And that's why I made the point about the Caribbean content and the Caribbean learning content. That's why I make the point about the Caribbean learning content. If we could start to program people's minds to think Caribbean and to be Caribbean and be confident in their Caribbeanness, we may have a different solution 20 years from today.
I think we've done enough to stoke the audience. So I see a number of questions coming in. So definitely. One of the questions, and again, we may not be able to get to all of the questions, but I do encourage anyone who poses a question. I am absolutely certain that during the course of the next 3 days, you will hear a response. So we invite you to tune back in tomorrow afternoon, later on this afternoon, and Friday afternoon. If we don't get to your question. But the first question is, to what extent will COVID-19, I saw that right here, sort of affect our efforts in terms of rebooting? I can't see where that went to, but yes, okay, yes. To what extent would the COVID-19 affect that, hamper that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, COVID-19 has clearly had a huge impact on our economies. It has been particularly difficult for the tourism and travel dependent countries. They're the most heavily impacted. But this is what we call a supply side shock, right? It's like a switch of you can travel and you can't travel has been turned on and off. And there will come a point where it's turned back on again. As steep as things fell, things will recover. Maybe the recovery will be a little bit slower because of the these surges and there's hesitancy, and maybe it takes 2 years to recover what it took 1 year to lose. But I don't see this being a long recovery. This is not a demand type recession where there's really a shortage of demand. The reason why people didn't come to our region is not because they didn't have enough cash. They ran out of cash, they couldn't travel. That takes a long time to recover. They weren't allowed to travel. So when you have, and then now they're going to be allowed to travel. So I don't think that is going to be that long term. I do think that we're going to have some debt problems because trying to hold the economy afloat for 2 years has increased debt. There are going to be some lasting issues, but I'm not pessimistic. I think in 18 months' time, our economies will be, we will be back to the same economic challenges we had of long-term evolution, as opposed to having to deal with COVID.
Yeah, I just want to add that COVID has caused its problems, has caused challenges for the economies, all economies around the world. I agree with Abby that we could recover from this quickly. But I also want to say that you should note that the recommendations, certainly in this report, has very little to do with money or finance. The recommendations of this report, we said in the report, we have adopted an approach that attempts to cut the obstacles of funding and readiness and rest purely on political will. So I didn't know that COVID damaged that. In fact, it should have reinforced it. It should have given people, the governments have had the strength to deal with COVID, and therefore they should also translate that kind of energy and robustness into dealing with the economy and into dealing with the whole CARICOM movement.
And that's a great point, in terms of for people thinking about CARICOM and rethinking about CARICOM. Procurement of vaccines, sharing of vaccines, trying to do regional procurement of protective equipment. PAHO, the Caribbean Public Health Organization, CARFO, they played vital roles regionally. And I think the ministries of health will tell you how useful it was that we had such things. But let's get on to another question.
All right. One of the questions is, you mentioned digital platforms. Has CARICOM sought to partake in bringing more exposure to the metaverse of the Caribbean public?
I don't think we feel that we have a role to tell people how technologies are going to develop and predict whether we end up being users of the metaverse or not. If anything, COVID made me be much more conscious of the non-metaverse reality, sitting in one's garden, contemplating life. I think we've all done more of that than we've ever done before with COVID. And then realize how much we enjoy it, how much we enjoy Caribbean sunsets and our islands. What I think is the role of CARICOM here is making sure that some of these artificial obstacles, like very expensive roaming fees, are removed. And so one of the recommendations is a single roaming rate across the Caribbean, or at least roam like your home. And we, partly as a result of the CARICOM's Commission's recommendation, a negotiation has started, led by your own Selby, your former finance minister. And we think we are close to achieving a version of roam like your home, or a single rate for roaming that will dramatically reduce the costs of people traveling around the region and using their telephones. Because I think these artificial obstacles, because of course the networks are the same, these artificial obstacles for us in communicating with each other, trading with each other, speaking to each other, it's important we break those down.
Let me ask you this, Gregory. One of the questions. Given that the growth pools of the world focus on innovation and intellectual property, the education system in the region neglects the technical vocational skills and the knowledge. How then are we to catch up with the rapidly growing economies if we continue to neglect this basic tenet of development?
I think the answer is written in the question. Insofar as major reforms are required in our education system. Just this morning, again, I was having a conversation with someone who was making the point that in Trinidad, and I suppose elsewhere in the region, there's a lot of dispute and conversation over common entrance exam. And when you look at common entrance exam and what it does, it focuses on just a few things. And the children who are successful there, we call them bright, and we hold them up on a pedestal. And that examination and so many of our other examinations ignore the multiple intelligences of people, of children. So we need to create that space where those who are differently inclined, those who have different strengths and so on, can blossom in the same way as Darren Conrad blossomed, you know? And I'm not saying that you're not technically skilled, Darren, but...
Late bloomer.
but yeah, so that's what needs to happen. So like I said, I agree with the participant that the world is into technology, the world is into innovation, and we got to start our children from young, really moving forward in that regard. And that requires us to pay attention to the multiple intelligences of every human being, and not necessarily to those that are focused by the structure of the school system that we have now.
The biggest obstacle to development is that we say to 80% of our kids that they have failed.
Yeah.
And if we, and you know, back to Sir Arthur Lewis, the unlimited supply of labor, we are going to move to an economy where there isn't an unlimited supply of labor because we are amongst these kids who've been told that they have failed, but they're all, you know, uniquely, and they've all of their attributes and skills and motives are fully engaged. I think separate from that, we also need to make sure that our university is a pole of innovation. We need to make sure we incentivize that. In Barbados, for instance, we pay, as you know, we have free tertiary education. One of the things that we should discuss is whether that block grant that currently goes to how many students are enrolled at Cave Hill, maybe that should be divided into two, and based on how many students are enrolled in Cave Hill, plus how good is the research coming out of Cave Hill, to incentivize some of that research, some of that basic research that governments have to support, and to also incentivize the relationship, and I know St. Augustine does a fair bit of this, between companies and the university, and to be pushing more of that, because our corporates are underinvesting in R&D. So if we want to develop, we have to stop calling our kids failures, and we have to get our private sector to invest in R&D, as well as the public sector and the universities.
Let's ask one of the questions focused on, turn our attention from the education a little bit to the investment side. One of the participants asks, there are trillions of US dollars of investable capital in the ESG and impact investing space from which the region can benefit. Why isn't there mechanisms to encourage more impact and ESG investing in the region?
Well, that is, of course, what I talked about. That was a key part of our report. And what the mechanism you need is a rating. Those ESG investors say, okay, we think there are ideas there, but we don't know when we're investing in a project in the Caribbean, what is the ESG impact? Whilst when we invest in America and in Europe, we know the ESG impact. So we need to have, so we want to create a regional set of ratings. And in fact, we think we'll go beyond that and create something that also includes resilience. how does a investment impact the resilience of the country? And we think that if investors could see that, it would really draw in that trillions of dollars of investment. At the moment, that $1 trillion of investment, trillions, say that they don't have enough things to invest in. So why do they not come here? Because we don't tell them. They don't get enough information, not information they can use, that they can compare. They can compare for an investment in Trinidad versus an investment in Colombia. They don't have the metrics that can do that. And so if we can provide that metrics, we think that will create a key mechanism to bring that money in.
Right, great, thank you, Prof. And I mean, when we're having fun, the time always seems to run out quickly on us. The clock has been ticking while we've been having you guys, the gentlemen, speak. And so I will give you quickly a couple of minutes each to make some sort of closing remarks, something that you may have missed.
You sure we can't do a couple more questions? Because we've spoke, Gregory, what do you think?
It all depends on where the time is.
All right. All right. Okay. So yes, their clock is running different to ours. So we have a few more minutes. They have their wrong clock. We have the correct clock. One of the questions, Prof, you mentioned, one of the participants wants to know, said you mentioned balancing centralization and decentralization of decision-making in a regionally integrated Caribbean. Is there any systematic methodology to determine on which levels decisions should be managed?
Well, the principle is called subsidiarity, and it's a test you do to see where is something best organized. An example I used was garbage collection, right? Garbage collection is not best done out of Georgetown, your garbage collection. It's not even best done out of Port of Spain. It's probably best done out of your local area. You have various councils, etc. So you need to look at each thing and say, where is the best way of organizing that? Now, if you're going to do, for example, development of vaccines or distribution of vaccines, is that best done by every council, by every country, or regionally? That's probably something best done regionally. So you test it. And the test is, where is this thing best done? There are actually not many things that are best done regionally. And we will then focus on those things and try and do them better. Trying to do everything, including things that are not best done regionally, is one of the reasons why CARICOM has not moved forward.
Gregory, you want to chime in?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Now, someone is making a statement here, and I think this statement has merit in it, in that they're speaking to the ability of now we mentioned the bridging the digital divide and moving by way of technology, not knowing, I mean, what it used to look like in the past. A port is now essentially a port. You plug into that port, right? But this person is asking, what about the average person on the street? The lay person who may have difficulty in terms of accessing information. They may not have the ability to purchase devices and so on. What scope is there for that person in this type of arrangement where we're having discussion of this type of moving forward and speeding up? In essence, I'm hearing, will there be some people left behind?
Well, I think the digital divide is very important, the knowledge gap, but I don't think those are our obstacles. To give a iPad, ThinkPad to every kid, we can do that. We may not have done it, but we can do that. To make, the average number of cell phones per person in the Caribbean is over 1, right? I think, in fact, it's about 2. So I don't think devices are a problem, or if there are a problem, they're an achievable, we can overcome that. Can we negotiate with the telecoms companies to get cheap broadband for small users? We can do that. So then, and those are things we need to do, because all of our people need to be able to use this as a device and a technique. And indeed, it is the future modes of production that you have to be part of this in order for you to have your fair share and to be able to develop yourself and have the choices. The state can help in that process, but I don't see, giving every person a device, making sure there's free, cheap broadband. Those are not huge problems, and we can achieve that.
I look at it this way, I say that the world has seen many technological changes and advancements as we go back in history. When I was a child growing up studying for common entrance, we had no electricity. Was I marginalized? I wasn't. I survived with what I had until more could have been afforded, until I could afford it. So where we are right now, I think, is that digital devices and connectivity is becoming one of those necessities in life because we need it to move forward. So it's no different from water, it's no different from electricity. It's almost a utility now that we must have, and it can be provided. So I'm agreeing with Abby. I don't see that as being a major constraint to development or growth going forward.
So certainly, as we can see it, all achievable in terms of priorities, all achievable. And with that sense of optimism, we can notably say that, again, it's not going to take a whole lot of money. And it's very unusual that you find a group of economists and getting together and coming up with proposals that not going to cost money to implement, but just some political will and moving towards that true definition of what treatment of development is, as Prof. so defined earlier on in the conversation about what is development. So gentlemen, it's a wrap here. Of course, we did not get a chance, but of course we will definitely probably find a way to communicate some more with you going forward. And of course, if you have any closing remarks or something that you felt that you didn't touch on, like, the movement away from the orthodoxy of the fiscal space, something like that, you might want to just use this opportunity to wrap in terms of saying a few words there.
Well, all I want to say,
you go ahead.
What I want to say is that I would like all the participants here who have not read that report to go read the report. Because I think what I would like to see is more advocacy across the region with ordinary people, with students, student groups, youth groups, civil society organizations, championing those 4 simple solutions, so soft, simple projects, initiatives that we've identified in the report, so that the political leaders can see the value of it and can be pressed into taking action in order for us to realize this. We firmly believe as commissioners that CARICOM needs these things in order to get a kickstart, so that people begin to believe. See, part of the thing about economic growth and is belief. If you believe that it could happen, then more and more people will work towards it. But how do you generate that belief? We need to talk about it. You need to talk about it. The people need to talk about it. But people could only talk about it when they read the report. So my advice to you at the end of this conference, go online, bam, bam, download the report of the CARICOM Commission. That's your homework for tonight.
Well, I can get an A+. I did my homework before. But what I will do is I will sort of take this opportunity to ask the planners to see if we can get a link established from the COTE program directly to the report, so there's not too much searching, so that report can be easily accessible. Prof, over to you.
There are no better words than the ones Gregory used to end this session, so let me leave it there.
All right, great. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Indeed, an honor to those of you who are listening. The chairman of the commission of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy, as well as one of the commissioners who were key in put together the report of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy, speeding up the Caribbean. So again, we will try to establish that link for you to be able to browse that report, read it. It's really an enjoyable read. It makes you feel energized in terms of economic growth and development moving forward is possible. It is doable, and it's not going to be a strain on any particular economic system. With that said, again, we encourage you thank you, gentlemen. Thank you again on behalf of the Conference on the Economy. And we do hope that you will click in and out some of the other sessions that we have. We have coming up in the next session, manufacturing, which is going to be chaired by Dr. Henry Bailey. And I would toss you back over now to Dr. Mohammed, who would then introduce session 2. Thank you all for listening. You've been a great audience. Thank you for all of the questions. And we look forward to your continued participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Darren. Wonderful chairing of a very refreshing, enlightening session. And I think often we really don't get a feel of what's going on in CARICOM. We're always hearing about CARICOM, but I think it took us inside, and Greg and Professor Prasad, we are really very appreciative that you all came and you shared the ideas. And I think one of the things that resonate with me is the unsticking, because for too long we have been hearing that CARICOM wants to do many things, but very few come, bear fruit. So this was really very refreshing to hear. And thank you very much to both of you, and thank you also to Darren for sharing this session. So before we move to our second session, which is on manufacturing, and I'd like to let us get a few words from our sponsors, and then we'll resume.
Stop your bow, Mr. Fiddler. Oh, hi. This country so colorful and truly diverse. We're doing our best to put TNT first. Youth success through advancement, we encourage. We proudly supporting the rich cultural heritage, promoting development in the sporting arena, and empowering women for equality of gender. We sustaining the environment and strengthening the society. First citizens helping paint a brighter TNT. Drag your bow, Mr. Fiddler.
Some of the most special things in life take time to come to fruition. And when they do, the rewards can enrich lives for generations to come. The wait is so worth it. Contact the UTC today and get growing.
At the Inter-American Development Bank in Trinidad and Tobago, we are proud to have a diverse team of professionals representing various disciplines and nationalities who work collaboratively with local stakeholders to improve the lives of citizens in TNT. The IDB group consists of 3 windows. IDB Lab, which supports the development of innovative micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. IDB Invest, which provides loans to larger private sector entities for development initiatives. And IDB, which engages with the government to implement strategic priorities by providing loans, technical assistance, research, and advice. Please take the time to learn more about our work, jobs at the IDB Group, events, and financing opportunities by following @CN Coburn RepTT on social media.
In the blink of an eye, the world changed forever.
El gobierno dará a conocer en las próximas horas una serie de medidas sanitarias y económicas para seguir enfrentando la pandemia.
Una reunión con el presidente y el jefe de gobierno.
A global crisis of unprecedented proportions, from which no country has escaped. In Latin America, we have faced many challenging times, some more difficult than others. But today, we all understand that solidarity is our biggest strength. "50 years ago, CAF was created with a mission. 5 Andean countries united to promote sustainable development and regional integration, thus improving quality of life and boosting productivity. Today, we are composed by 19 countries and account for over 600 million people. And despite the distance and the barriers that separate us, we must work more united than ever, because only together we will succeed. The world will not be the same, but now we have the opportunity to build an even better one. a more harmonious, cleaner, and efficient planet. And for the challenges that lie ahead, at CAF, we want to say 3 words. Here we are. To build together a region of opportunities, especially for the most vulnerable ones, with infrastructure that improves quality of life and increases connectivity. A region of vibrant cities, of entrepreneurs and businesses committed to their communities, of societies respectful with a natural world that we all share and must care for. At CAF, we have walked along a region for 50 years on its road to progress. Now more than ever, here we are. And here we will remain, firm in our commitment of being the development bank of Latin America.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We share it. We use it to live better, longer, smarter, to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways that can enrich life for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Those were some words from our sponsors. And as we head into session 2, which deals with manufacturing, I'd like to introduce the chair of this session, Dr. Henry Bailey. Henry is a lecturer in the Department of Economics here at the University of the West Indies. He has been in full-time research and teaching for over 10 years. Prior to this, he worked in industry at the regional level for many, many years. His main areas of research are in the areas of health economics, entrepreneurship, and development. So over to you, Henry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. So it's my pleasure to chair this session on manufacturing. As Dr. Mohammed said, I worked for many years in industry. I actually worked in a factory, but I was not a manufacturing person, but I was in a manufacturing environment for a very long time. Manufacturing is one of the sectors that we chose for special attention in this conference. Manufacturing has played an interesting role or taken an interesting place in many of the development reports and many of the development agendas that we've had in the Caribbean, including at the level of CARICOM. And the recent reports on retooling, the recent roadmap, these documents squarely address manufacturing. We thought that that particularly coming out of this session with Prof. Prasad and Mr. Maguire a few minutes ago, and that idea of subsidiarity, I read the report as well in preparation for this, and I was particularly interested in that notion of what is the optimal policy point for different types of activity, and I'm hoping that we get some kind of feedback on that kind of issue from the panelists today. So we're going to have 4 really interesting speakers and 4 really interesting presentations. The first, our session today covers Trinidad, Jamaica, and Barbados. Our first presenter is going to be Mr. Mark Hill. And Mr. Hill is the current Chief Executive Officer of Export Barbados. The IDC is the Formula Barbados Investment and Development Corporation. He's the founder of two companies, Enogen Technologies and Biogen Technologies. These are R&D companies in the clean technologies market. He's a PhD student at Salesas in Barbados, specializing in governance and policy. The second presenter will be from Trinidad. It will be Dr. Mahindra Ramesh Ramdeen. He is the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. He's also been on the board of NEDCO. In fact, we were talking about NEDCO on TV this morning when we had an interview about this conference today. He's worked as a trade development specialist. He worked in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. He worked as an economist. His background is in economics, and his PhD is in foreign trade. And then we will go to Mr. John Mahfood from Jamaica. He's actually the president of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exports Association. He was the committee chairperson for membership and MSME program development. And he's the CEO of a company called Jamaican Teas Limited. He's a certified public accountant and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Jamaica. And our final presenter will be an academic, Miss Therese Lee Chan, who will present on some research that she's doing. She's an assistant lecturer in the Department of Chemical Engineering at UWI. She also has a master's from Manchester. She's doing a lot of work in post-combustion CO2 capture. She's also a PhD student at UWI in looking into integration, optimization, and sustainability. So we have four presenters from four different viewpoints to look at manufacturing in the region coming out of COVID. And we will then have a panel discussion. So each presentation will be 10 minutes. I'll send you a signal at the end of 8 minutes. And then we'll have a discussion of about 20 minutes that will include a Q&A from the audience. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over now to Mr. Hill. The floor is yours. You begin.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel, and really looking forward to not only participating, but also hearing what my colleagues throughout the region have to say. You know, I really believe in being a Caribbean person and helping to develop the overall region. I'll just try to share my screen right now. Make sure I have the, all right. Okay, so I'm just going to speak quickly on where Barbados is heading, where we're going from a manufacturing point of view, and to just give a quick overview of how we're positioning our industrial brand, our manufacturing brand into 2030. So basically we're on the drawing board, and as opposed to just simply looking at how things have been, we're looking at where we're going over the next 10 years and working on that pipeline. One of the first things I want to underscore is like what I believe as the CEO, philosophically. I believe that manufacturing and industry is all about the business of science. And through the effective practice of science and design, we can transform the Caribbean economies. And the other thing that I believe here is that we have to boost scientific exports in the Caribbean through effective offtake agreements and negotiations, like 10 to 15 years. So traditionally, manufacturing in Barbados has been around, value add of goods. Our entire framework was built up primarily for garments and furniture, but that era is gone. You only have a few people that are into chemicals and stuff like that. But what we're doing now is repositioning and currently creating a framework whereby offtake agreements really become the financial instrument and the kind of project financing mechanisms that gives our manufacturers greater confidence to venture out into new and exciting areas. So we're going to speak to that as we go forward. Yeah. All right. So right now, what we're looking to do is repositioning our sector to be more export oriented. So the debate between import substitution manufacturing as opposed to manufacturing for the external market, we're resolving that and saying, let's focus on the export market. So therefore our products are being designed with the international market in view. They're being developed within the international market in view. And to that extent, we're not just looking at export orientation, but we're looking at how does Barbados diversify its economy away from tourism, and can industry and manufacturing serve as another pillar by us innovating and looking at manufacturing innovation from an industry from a totally different angle. So because Barbados is and our leaders at the frontier of the narrative on climate change and global warming, 1.5 to stay alive, and the sustainable development goals and stuff, we say, well, let's frame out our diversification within that context of climate change and the commodities associated with reducing and making the climate a better place and the planet a better place for everyone. So to that extent, we have like 3 key areas that we're focusing on. So export of energy. So the whole concept of green hydrogen and activated carbon, that's a space we're going into. And we're well down the road with that. And you can see from the chart here, hydrogen is pretty much well positioned to be very, very bankable based on the Platts assessment. Also, export of science and design. So we're investing a lot more in the whole life science space, and I'm going to speak a lot more about that as I go forward in the 10 minutes that's been allotted, and really looking at the value chain innovations that we need to do in that whole manufacturing space as well. And then the full exploration of our oceans, new logistics, and supply change models. So how do we now leverage within the Caribbean? And I think the panel before was kind of alluding to it, shorten the supply chain so that we don't have these kind of disruptions going forward. All right. So on the activated carbon side, we're negotiating offtake agreements, global offtake agreements, giving ourselves 10, 15 years to work with. And that market is very, very interesting for us because with activated carbon, we can do water treatment, air treatment. It allows us to tap a number of different industries, and it gives us a base load commodity to go into the international market as well. On the life science side, the medical devices space, the biotechnology space, agro biotech space, pharmaceutical space, that whole space, right now we have a TRR out to the top international accounting firms, and they are doing a comprehensive analysis of our space and mapping out that roadmap in terms of how we become really a strong manufacturing hub for the life sciences in the region. So the numbers there just kind of give you a sense that we're looking to ride that life science wave, and for a number of reasons which we'll speak to. One of the other key things is that our current exporters is broken down into 5 tiers here in Barbados. So we have tier 1, which is like you're earning over a certain level of revenue, down to tier 5. But what we want you to know is that all of our exporters are very, very heavy in biotrade and bioeconomy activities. So the life sciences coupled with the traditional bioeconomy, biotrade, we think that both of them will complement each other as we seek to strengthen not only the product side, but the product service combination, and then the experience combination as well. Because manufacturing is no longer just, you make a product, put out a warranty, but it's the whole experience around that whole product and stuff like that as well. There's just some of our numbers right now so that you can see from a data point of view where we are. Currently 2021, COVID did impact, but you notice that biotrade still kind of held steady. So COVID didn't really impact negatively on our exports. Only in the design market, we saw a slight decline, but we're still analyzing why we had that. And then we're now ramping up our oceans as well. So we build out 3 pillars based on Barbados's future strengths. And now we analyze all of our data along this particular line. You can see the data from our tiers as well, holding pretty steady, the top companies in that tier 1 area and the tier 2, but now we're creating some interventions at the tier 5 level. And you can see those interventions beginning to work since COVID, and those numbers are beginning to come back up, beginning better participating, some more design thinking for exporters coming in there and helping our exporters to think a little bit more and our manufacturers to think a little bit more creative about what they're producing. So we are leveraging our fermentation technology as a base load. So you know we're the home of rum, but rum sits on a technology base of fermentation, is a biotech industry. So then we're stepping and doing a lot of fermentation biotech technology innovations in this space, and really going very heavy in our new capacity building when it comes to this space and letting the science do the work going forward for our manufacturers. So in a nutshell, as I begin to wrap up, because I'm trying to stick within the 10-minute window, we're really building the scientific policy framework to do a number of things. We're only 300,000 persons, part of a bigger community in the Caribbean. And what value do we as Barbadians contribute to the wider Caribbean? And that's the question that we're asking ourselves. Not how do we become insulated, but what capacities do we build, what muscle do we build that helps carry the Caribbean forward? And we're saying that the life science and biotech muscle is what we will build and help carry the whole region forward on this particular platform. So looking at becoming an accelerator for life sciences and biotechnology, right? Becoming an accelerator for life sciences and biotechnology. Setting up a global council with high-level scientists from around the world to really kind of like ratify the products and services that are coming through this pipeline. And also full IP protection. This is what we recognize, that people in this space, IP protection is critical. And that's one of the key policy areas that the Caribbean really has to work on if manufacturing is really going to take off. Our engagement with WIPO and the WTO rules and regulations around intellectual property is something that we really have to resolve, especially as we bring international companies into this space to operate. High quality life science infrastructure, talented life science and biotech workforce, and also economic zones and nearshoring production opportunities. So those are the kind of policy frameworks that we're working on. And then from a marketing perspective, we introduced a welcome stamp program, but now we'll be looking at creating a welcome stamp for scientists so that we become the hub where global scientists come to really see Barbados as a space where to carry out your scientific research and activities. Yeah. So again, global experts, I'm going to jump over that. So the key areas in terms of manufacturing, which augment what we're doing. So augmenting our rum, augmenting our food science sector, which is very, very strong right now. But we're building that layer with the pharmaceuticals and drug manufacturing, medical technology manufacturing, drug and preclinical trials as well. Going forward, bioenergy aspects. So algae and using different forms of carbon capturing technologies, bio-based, research and development as a whole, and again, attracting bigger international food science companies to come and do themselves. So we allocate about 23 acres where we're building a life science park. And this is about 200,000 square feet of clean, high-tech scientific space. We have 13 industrial spaces on island right now. And those spaces are being transformed and upgraded. So that allowing our manufacturing sector to have new levels of technology, new improved technologies to work with going forward, and really keeping everything green and running everything on renewable energy, running everything using our oceans, to help power the sector and stuff like that. So it's an integrated design and plan that we're working out on. I'll just skip that one. And then just come to our global standards in terms of industrial robotics and using industrial robotics to really compete on the international level in a significant way. So what I'm saying here, this is not stuff that's a pie in the sky. This is, as you would say, this is loading. This is bankable. The financing is there. We're doing it. We're rolling it out. And I'm currently going through a lot of upgrading of the mindset of our manufacturers. So I will kind of wrap up there. So we have that study going on right now by the leading accounting firms. And we're really looking to position Barbados to help contribute to how we lift the overall Caribbean and not just how we meet our own needs as an island. So that's it there for me for the time being, if there's any other thing. Yeah.
Good, thank you, Mr. Hill. It's a pretty interesting work that you guys have going on over there. I look forward to possibly engaging with you later on in a few weeks or a few months. There's a lot of interesting stuff that you have going on. And I think during the discussion, we'll want to go a little deeper into some things, particularly issues of integration of what you're doing in Barbados with the rest of you. I'm fascinated by that, so thank you. We hand over now to Mr. Ramdeen, Dr. Ramdeen, to bring us the vision of the TTMA, Trinidad and Tobago. So Ramesh.
No problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey, Dr. Bailey, and your guests and the panel, and everyone who's locked on, panelists, attendees, everyone. I have a presentation here, but I'm not going to stick to this presentation because I need time constraints and I'm minded by the guidance provided to us. So what I will do, I'll share my presentation. It can be disseminated accordingly, but I'll quickly go through some of the main points so I could keep to my 10 minutes allotment that was given to me. So basically TTMA, what TTMA is about is the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. We represent the non-energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago. We have approximately 570 members at this point in time, of which in Trinidad and Tobago, we have well over 1,100 manufacturers, but approximately half of those people belong to the TTMA. All the major exporters are members of the TTMA and all the larger players. So out of the 1,100 people who are manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago, all the registered certified companies are members of the TTMA. We second largest employer of people in Trinidad and Tobago, close to 60 million people direct, 60,000 people directly, not 60 million. In terms of export numbers, it's approximately $6 billion worth of export that we engage each year. And that includes downstream derivative of energy, some of the downstream derivative items of energy, items like iron, scrap iron, and those kind of things as well. But if you take out all those things, strictly the non-energy manufacturing exports represent about $3.5 billion. Our contribution to the GDP is 19%, and again, that is a reclassification that recently took place in Trinidad and Tobago to include downstream derivative. Previously to that, it hovers around 9 to 10%, but when we add those downstream derivative, like ammonia, urea, methanol, and those things, it's about 19% contribution to the GDP. So that's just a background of the TTMA, what we're about. So I was asked to look at the impact of COVID, how that impacted manufacturing, and how we could position ourselves to come out of this COVID environment and reap the rewards to be had, not only from a Trinidad and Tobago perspective, but from a Caribbean perspective. So that is how I'm gonna tailor my presentation. So we all know what happened with COVID in 2020 from March all the way up to the present period, and probably we have another year to engage this whole process of COVID. Manufacturing in Trinidad and Tobago, like elsewhere in the Caribbean region, took a significant hit. We saw from March last year, when we did our initial survey, a significant amount of companies would have lost opportunities because borders were closed, companies were closed, people were quarantined, manufacturers were not allowed to open. And in Trinidad and Tobago case specifically, we started off with everybody closing their operations, closing their doors, and gradually we got some opening. Fast tracking to this period in time, meaning 2021, we see a lockdown took place again from about March, April this year, and the same situation we saw. What I can say is that when we look at the statistics for 2020 and then the statistics for the first part of 2021, January to March, April, thereabout, it was very encouraging in terms of the export sales, because by January 2021, the economy was relatively open, manufacturing started to pick back up. And when you look at sales between the first quarter of 2021 relative to the first quarter of 2020, it was comparable. That was just before the COVID hit in 2020. So it tells us that the manufacturing, the non-energy manufacturing sector was picking back up, was engaging, and was doing relatively well. And when we dissect the figures somewhat, we saw that we had a lot of innovativeness, a new type of industry was springing up. People were involved in things like health and wellness. We saw a lot of people engaging in face masks, sanitizers, PPE. So we saw those growth in those sectors. Food and beverage was a significant sector as well that continued to do well. Even in the second lockdown, the TTMA was able to work with our members and get government to allow essentials to continue to open. And by essentials, I mean food and beverage, the agricultural sector, cleaning agents, plumbing and electrical, pharmaceutical, and those type of sectors. And we saw that those sectors, as they were allowed to open, they were able to continue production, continue export, and continue to produce for local consumption. And I can say without doubt, if that didn't happen, we would have had some trying times in Trinidad and Tobago where we would have had challenges in terms of meeting our needs, our demand needs for food, beverages, essentials, cleaning material, and all those things. So allowing those sectors to open helped promote and push the non-energy manufacturing sectors in the area of essentials. So immediately, what we were able to do in TTMA to help our manufacturers is to get all those essentials open. And that represents about 50% of our manufacturers. And gradually, we work with the government, TTMA work with the government and engage in a policy called Vaccinate to Operate. We got 40,000 jobs in the hands of our members. I mean, we do all these things to promote the opening of manufacturing. We were able to work with them to get curfew passes. We were able to work with them to adjust the framework with regards to curfew, where manufacturers could operate their shifts during curfew hours, but they were not allowed to come outside. They could stay in the factory and all those things. I'm telling you all that to say that it bore fruit for us, because when you look at the statistics as at the end of the third quarter in 2021, we see there's a growth in non-energy manufacturing exports relative to 2020 and comparable to 2019 figures. So it is heartening to see that manufacturing has been picking back up in the last quarter of 2021. We had some challenges, how companies engage the process. Well, people had to lay off some workers. Most people engage in two-shift system. A number of companies reduced the amount of items that they produce. So instead of running 5, 6, 7, 8 different types of products, they prioritize the products that were key and were doing well on the market. We pivot the manufacturing sector, the TTMA, we develop strategies and work towards creating market opportunities for our members. We engage in a number of virtual platforms, virtual meetings, virtual missions. We had over 8 virtual missions this year that bore fruit. We have a significant amount of manufacturers reaping rewards from these missions that were engaged. We provide seminars and workshops sensitizing people about the need to get vaccinated, how to embrace the protocols, the safety protocols. The nice thing about it was the food and beverage and generally the non-energy manufacturing sector in the region is self-regulated. So we didn't have to wait on government and protocols to be handed down to us. Most of us to get into a factory, we already wear masks, we already sanitize, you must wash hands. So a number of the things were already there. What we had to do is engage in a little more information, a little more education, as well as we provided, the TTMA provided PPE to those small and micro operators who could not have sourced those items. We work with our members, the larger members come together and provide assistance, financial assistance in some instances, technical assistance in some instances, to ensure that the manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago were able to cope with the challenges of the COVID. So, as I said, today we're doing much better. Trinidad and Tobago manufacturers have been able to grow operation in some instances, but most importantly, what I can report to you today, that I have not had any manufacturer come to me and say they're closing their doors because of the challenges of COVID. We have had businesses in Trinidad and Tobago close their doors, but when you dissect that data, majority of it would have been retail, majority of it would have been store operators, the mall operators, people who are involved in that type of business, which is retail. But in terms of manufacturing, you haven't seen that. And that is heartening. And as I said, there have been significant adjustments. People move from 3 shifts to 2 shifts initially. They roll back the number of hours, how much people could work in the factory, work from home, and a number of adjustments took place, and for the betterment as well. And what I've seen is that a lot of people use this opportunity to invest and retool in digitalization and all these different things. So by force, people were able to pivot along those lines. So TTMA is geared towards pushing this whole idea of digitalization and pivoting, and we're working with government to get the right legislation in place. We think today we shouldn't have to line up at the BIR office and the VAT office to pay for these things. You know, we need to get a single electronic window working optimally. We need to get the border agencies. All these different things we would like to see sorted out. I want to jump straight into the adjustment that we had to make at the Caribbean CARICOM level to combat and fight the challenges of the COVID environment. The first thing that jumps out at me, at this point in time, we have to get CSME right. Now is the time to get CSME right. There's no better opportunity than today. We need to have some serious discussions at the political level. We must have the political will to discuss issues of deepening and widening of CARICOM. It's the only way we can make it work. It is the only way we could, as business operators, we can leverage and benefit from economies of scale and economies of scope. We have 7 million English-speaking Caribbean people who are fighting tooth and nail to put the SME, the CSME working optimally for quite a number of years now. If you ask me today, are we a free trade agreement? Are we a common market? Are we a SME, a CSME? Are we a political union? No one could give me a clear indication where we are really and truly. In 2008, we're supposed to have the free movement of people. That was pushed back to 2012, then 2015. I don't even know where we are today where those things are concerned. Issues pertaining to circulation, free circulation, contingency rights. You know, we are the most uncommon region in the world, if you were to ask me. We have challenges that travel throughout the Caribbean, they're stamping your passport 6 months still, all these different things. And we don't even have the rules of origin working optimally in the regional framework. You know, I could tell you frankly that to trade within the Caribbean region that's supposed to be the best free trade for manufacturers in the region is harder than trading with our extra regional partners like European Union and these things. The economic partnership agreement we signed, the rules of origin to engage in that trading arrangement is much more favorable than the rules we have within ourselves within the Caribbean region. Trinidad and Tobago import food bill is $6 billion roughly. And Guyana and Jamaica and Suriname and Belize and these countries could supply a significant amount of those items, but we still have to source it from extra regionally. Why? We're still fighting as crab in a barrel to sort out things like SPS, which is sanitary and phytosanitary issues. So we really have to get those issues sorted out. It's cheaper for Trinidad and Tobago to ship items to Miami than to ship items to Belize. Those are another challenges. Though let me even start to talk about air transportation. If we really want the trade to materialize the way it's supposed to, if we really want regional integration to materialize the way it's supposed to, we need to fix these fundamental problems. If we do, the trade will follow, the trade will develop. We need to, and I'm talking about deepening the integration process, but I'm also like to introduce widening the integration process. There's no reason why the ABC countries shouldn't be part of the CARICOM region, at least the common market. We need to have a serious discussion what is happening with Bahamas and Haiti. They have 1 foot inside, 1 foot outside. Are you a member? Are you not a member? We need to figure these things out. We need to have a serious conversation about Cuba. how we treat them with Cuba. They are part of the Caribbean framework, Puerto Rico, Martinique, Guadeloupe. All of a sudden, we put these countries together that are washed by the Caribbean Sea. We move from 7 million customers or consumers, or however you want to define them, to roughly 30, 40, 50 million, depending who come into the framework. So manufacturers from Barbados and Suriname and Guyana and Trinidad producing for, in Trinidad instance, 1.4 million and then 7 million, all of a sudden we're producing for 50 million. The whole scheme of things open up. Economies of scale come into play. You know, so it's a significant conversation. We need to have the political will to deepen and widen the integration process of CARICOM. We really and truly need that, and now is the time. This COVID situation has allowed for us to really take a step back and see if there's any advantages coming out of adversity. And I say, yes, they are. Local content, political will. We need to understand the strength in numbers and coming together as 15 independent states of CARICOM. And I know my time running out. I'm sure I'm getting buzzed.
Yeah, you're over time. If you could wrap up, Ramesh.
All right, so I'm wrapping up. So, you know, we really need to get this sorted out. You can hear my passion about getting CARICOM working optimally. I just want to end with one note. In adversities of COVID, there are opportunities. We need to leverage on that. Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, we really and truly need to get this thing working optimally. If we don't, we're going to miss opportunity. And I think the time is right for us to move forward in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. So when we have the discussion, well, I'll have a couple of questions, and we'll have you'll have an opportunity to elaborate on a few of the but I will say, Ramesh, your passion was palpable over the over the internet. Great stuff. So we turn now to the view from Jamaica. Mr. John Mahfood, who we introduced earlier. John, the floor is yours. Again, 10 minutes. After when we get close to 10 minutes, I'll start raising this piece of paper, and hopefully you'll use. Great stuff. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just to put it in context in terms of Jamaica's economy, approximately 3 million people. Per capita income is one of the lowest in the Caribbean at 5,000 US. And our sector, the manufacturing sector, has declined gradually since the late 80s, when it was about 16 to 18% of GDP to 8% now, and has been stable at approximately that rate. Jamaica in the 60s embarked on an exercise to grow manufacturers by putting in place protection so that any manufacturer who produced a product in Jamaica in the 60s, they prohibited the imports of those items. And so many international companies came to Jamaica and set up factory here to just, unfortunately, only produce products for Jamaica, never exported, and were not very efficient. And in the late 80s, the government of the day changed the rules and opened up the imports to make it free. And the Jamaican manufacturers were not prepared for that onslaught, and primarily those international companies simply pulled out and produced and shipped to Jamaica from elsewhere. So some of our issues over time has been high rates of devaluation, very expensive electricity. Our electricity costs approximately 39 US cents per kilowatt hour, which is the highest, one of the highest in the Caribbean. Our sector, I don't know if I mentioned, 80,000 employees. Our members of the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, about 500. And this year, 2021, we experienced a 14% growth in our manufacturing sector. This is partly due to the fact that back about 7 years ago, Jamaica, the Jamaican government embarked on a program with the IMF to reduce our GDP, debt to GDP, and it was reduced from 140 to less than 100 at the start of the pandemic. And this allowed the government a certain amount of flexibility in dealing with the additional cost of the pandemic and the loss of the tourist industry, which is a very big part of our economy. And this year, as I said, we grew 14%. One of the things I should mention, though, that we did an analysis and we found that the average cost per employee for the manufacturing sector was about up from related to COVID was about 350. Sorry, let me see. That's 50,000 Jamaican dollars. It's let me do a calculation quickly. Sorry, we don't have a common currency, 150. So 350 US dollars per employee that related to the cost of COVID in terms of time off, vaccination costs, putting in place mechanisms to fight against to protect the employees. This is a pretty significant cost when you relate it to the general manufacturing sector. Our inflation rate this year is 8.5%, which is about 2%, 2.4% above the US exchange rate, inflation rate. And it was 6% inflation rate in 2020. Unfortunately, our dollar, which is a floating exchange, has devalued by 12% in the last 2 years. Economists in the past and scholars used to tell us that it's a good thing to devalue, and Jamaica has done a good job of devaluing from in the 80s, from almost 1 to 1 for the US dollar. We're now at approaching 160 to 1. I can tell you that devaluation is one of the worst things that a country can happen to our country. You know, it makes the people very, very poor. It does not spur exports when you don't have local raw materials, and all you do is you have a perpetual cycle of devaluations, inflation, and people getting poorer. And I think that's part of why our per capita income remains so low. And yet the scholars also tell us that you need to devalue if your inflation rate is higher than the US rate of inflation. And we know in the last 2 years, Jamaica's inflation rate has been about 5% more than the US exchange rate in 2 years, yet we have devalued by 12%. The Bank of Jamaica has also decided that they're going to fight inflation, even though it's related to the cost of high shipping costs and high raw materials and finished goods, by increasing interest rates. And so they have increased the rates from about 3 months ago. The Bank of Jamaica rate from 0.5%, they have now moved it to 2%. And it looks like they will continue to increase the interest rates as they, because I don't think we have finished feeling the pass-through effect of the cost of freight and other raw material and finished goods. So I don't know if we are alone in that regard in the Caribbean, but it seems to be contrary to what is needed is not in a time of this economic downturn, so to speak, the increasing interest rates. I think there are some positives that we have seen. One is that the shipping cost from the Far East to at least Jamaica, I don't know about Barbados and Trinidad, is moved from about $2,000 to about $14,000. But interestingly, the shipping cost from the Far East to New York and Florida has increased even more, up to $20,000. And what that has done for some companies in Jamaica is that it has made our products a bit more competitive. Because if you have a container coming from the Far East that has added $18,000 to the cost, and our shipping costs from Jamaica to the Northeast US and to the rest of the Caribbean has remained relatively unchanged, it changes the balance so that some of our products in Jamaica are more competitive now than they were before the increase in the shipping costs. And some companies in Jamaica have started to increase more to Eastern Caribbean and to the US. And I presume that places like Trinidad would have the same temporary advantage that should be considered. The other thing we noticed in 2021 is that companies increased their efficiency. They reduced their costs. They found other ways of doing business and were able to squeeze more profits from the same sales that they had in 2020 and 2019. So that is a good thing. It bodes well for the rest of for 2022 and beyond, when your cost of operations decline, and if you can increase your sales back to previous levels, it will increase your profitability. The other thing that has been very, very successful in Jamaica is that we have developed a junior stock exchange, which allows small companies to go on the stock exchange. There's 5 years of tax-free profits and another 5 years of 50% profits. And you, of course, you're able to get additional capital. In Jamaica, we have had a history of very high interest rates and very conservative bankers. And what we have found is that those 45 or so companies that have gone on the junior stock exchange and raised $1 million to $3 million US have been able to transform themselves, not so much because of the additional capital, but they have transformed themselves in terms of the way of doing business. Their culture has changed. By being spotlighted on the exchange, they have upped their energy and upped their standards and upped their strategic planning. And we have seen evidence, very strong evidence, that companies over 5 years of being on the exchange have become very, very successful, very profitable. And you know, that gives us hope. And we, as the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, will be encouraging more companies to go on the junior exchange. And we hope that in another 2 or 3 years, we might get to 100 companies. And that new breed of company that is listed, that is doing business differently, is going to spell, I believe, very significant benefits for the country. I think that is my presentation for the time being.
Thank you. Thank you. Great stuff. So we've had manufacturing representatives from Barbados, from Trinidad, and from Jamaica sharing their vision, and we will have a discussion after this this final presentation in this session. And so we go now to an academic presentation from Therese Lee-Chan and her team. And Theresa, I'll hand it over to you. So as before, as we get closer to your time, I'll just use the paper as a sign. So,
thanks, Dr. Bailey.
Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. So this afternoon, I'd like to share some of the work our industrial ecology team at the Department of Chemical Engineering have been doing.
Hello.
Hello.
I think somebody has a microphone on. If you could do us the courtesy of just muting. Sorry about that, Therese.
That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to share some work on optimization with input-output models for industrial symbiosis. And this is at our Point Lisas industrial estate here in Trinidad. So industrial symbiosis has to do with physical material exchange. So here we have an example of an eco-industrial power core EIP, and this one is in Sweden. So here is shown, if we put our focus to the power plant here, we see that our steam is being sent from the power plant to the ethanol plant, and the ethanol plant sends its waste to other plants and it ships its ethanol. So industrial symbiosis is a waste management solution. It also involves a lot of collaboration among companies or plants. And ideally, these plants should be very near to each other, because if you think about distance and transportation costs, we want our costs to be as low as possible. So ideally, if we have any collaboration going on, we want it to be near each other. As you can see, there are many benefits of IS. IS could bring new business, it could transfer knowledge, increase our profits, and it could also reduce our emissions, reduce pollution and costs. I wanted to highlight this industrial symbiosis case in particular, and this one is in Denmark. It's called Kallenberg, and it was the first EIP in the entire world. And what they do, they aim to have a circular approach in production. So they try to reuse all their water, their energy, their materials. So they have that symbiotic mindset. So they're trying to develop, they're trying to have sustainable development in their companies. And that leads me to my point on sustainable development. So in the Brundtland report, which our former chancellor was part of, it was said that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And simply thinking, if we look back to the days when we had oil in abundance and natural gas in abundance, and we were using it all that time, if we were thinking about sustainable development, maybe we'll have a better formula right now rather than trying to switch totally and rely on renewable energy, etc. Also, this brings the point of different types of capital. So when you hear the word capital, you usually think cash, you think cash value, assets. But in sustainable development, we consider natural capital, which impacts our environment, social and human capital, as you as an individual, people in organizations or groups. So our team have been looking at different waste streams, and here you'll see I have waste streams or valuable byproducts, because really, what are they? Are they really waste, or could they be reused? So carbon dioxide is one we tend to look at. Main reason being it's a global gas, and we know that in Trinidad and Tobago, we have one of the highest CO2 emissions per capita. Now that doesn't mean that we emit a lot of CO2 compared to our counterparts in the US or the UK. It just means that based on our population size, we emit a lot of CO2. Also, we look at water. Water is a bit tricky. People ask why water, we're surrounded by water in the Caribbean. But think of water, it is a renewable resource, yes, but to reuse water in industry or domestically, we need to clean it up. And right now we clean it up with desalination, which requires energy. That energy we're getting is from electricity, which produces CO2. So we also emitting a lot of waste in that whole loop. What we use to look at our models is input outputs. And this is actually, you all may be familiar with this, it's actually based from accounting, and they use this in economics, the same principles, but we look at our process with raw material, energy, and we analyze our products, byproducts, and our waste. Here I'm showing the input-output analysis for ammonia, and we see that for every 78 tons per hour of ammonia being produced, we produce 95 tons per hour of processed CO2. And when I say processed CO2, this is high purity CO2. It's very concentrated, greater than 90 volume percent CO2 compared to the flue gas or exhaust gas, which is much lower in concentration. So we're producing high amounts of CO2. What we did, we looked at possible linkages in the Point Lisas industrial estate. So A1 to A5 here are ammonia plants, M1 to M3 are methanol. We use urea and W as waste. And we did some optimization. We found that just based, and this was done on part of the Point Lisas industrial estate, not all of the ammonia and methanol plants. We found that we have about 345 tons per hour of waste CO2. And this waste CO2 is processed CO2. So it's high purity CO2 being emitted in our environment. However, to redo this entire network, it would cost us about US 11.4 million, which probably isn't feasible. But the good thing is that we see that there's some industrial symbiosis occurring on our estate right now. So there's some potential for an eco park to develop out of Point Lisas industrial estate. And one thing we want to highlight here is that we think that carbon dioxide utilization should probably be investigated more. A lot of work and money and funding is put into carbon capture and storage, but there may be some value in reusing CO2, and it will give us an increased amount of industrial symbiosis. We did something similar for our water network, looking at processed water and utility water, and we optimized them in a similar way. The only difference here is that water, as we know, has a lot of impurities. So this had to be taken into account, which would lead to our model being a bit bigger than our CO2 model. Here, I'm just going to gloss over these, but these are some of the ways in which you could conduct multi-objective optimization. But essentially, all these methods give us either a compromise point or solution, which is on what we call the Pareto front or the trade-off curve. And there are many optimal solutions that lie on that curve. So to do this optimization, obviously we can't do this by hand because it's so big. We use software. So we use MATLAB, which is available to us at the UWI. And we also coded in some other methods into MATLAB. So we looked at our water network. Notice here, A1 is ammonia, M1, M4, methanol, M is melamine, and U is urea. Notice here that I have links going from sources to sinks, and they're on both sides compared to the CO2 because CO2 was emitted mostly by our ammonia plants as nearly pure. What we found was that our methods we actually coded worked a bit better in giving the Pareto front. And this was a bit baffling at first, but after dissecting the entire problem, we realized that the problem was actually with the software itself. So this is something the company actually needs to rectify. It also draws attention to how much different methods using multi-objective optimization could possibly lead to different results being obtained. Here, I just want to show what our water network look like. Again, this is a very small water network. It's a very reduced case compared to the larger water network. But we see that there's some potential for use of water within the plant itself and among the plants. So if we do that, this could actually lead to increased levels of industrial symbiosis. And here we measure the industrial symbiosis by what we call the eco-connectants. And this is very simple. As the concept of this is simply just like a food chain. If you think about a number of links, it's very similar how we calculate connectants in that way. And we see just by the smaller network, there's potential to reuse more wastewater on the Point Lisas industrial estate. Before I wrap up, I want to draw your attention to sustainability indicators. So I mentioned before about 3 types of capital. Similarly, you know the dimensions of sustainability, social, environmental, and economic domains. So we don't want to target one domain. We want to use a composite and look at all of these domains together when we're looking for solutions, whether it be a new process or evaluating a process. We want to look at all these indicators. So here I just show some of the indicators for our water network. As you can see, we have a reduction in wastewater, which is good for our environment. We have more plant links, which is good for our social. And economic, well, that may need further investigation, but it looks like we have some savings there. So takeaways from this is that we could use input-output models with multi-objective optimization to help us in decision-making in terms of new processes and looking at our existing processes. We need to be careful with what optimization methods we choose. Waste materials could actually create valuable byproducts and there's grounds investigating carbon dioxide utilization on the estates. So what does this mean for us in Trinidad and Tobago and us for Caribbean as a whole? We probably have the potential to reuse a lot of our waste material. And by doing this, we could collaborate and increase our industrial symbiosis among our companies and our countries. And we should start in Trinidad and Tobago recognizing Point Lisa's industrial estate as an eco-park. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the end of the presentations, and we move now into the discussion. So we've had the viewpoint from the manufacturing sectors in Trinidad and in Barbados and in Jamaica, and we had one technical piece that looks at this input-output model and synergy. So I'd invite people in the audience to symbiosis, sorry, not synergy. I'd invite people in the audience now to post questions online. I'll start with a few of my own. One thing that I would like to hear from the presenters from Trinidad and Jamaica, from Dr. Ramdeen and from Mr. Mahfood. Could you say a few words on what is the vision of your respective organizations for manufacturing in your country? So we had a really thorough, I think a pretty solid discussion of the challenges that COVID brought to you and the opportunities that COVID has brought to both. And interestingly, the viewpoints of the two countries were not identical. Both countries saw different opportunities being created by the pandemic. But I'd like to know more in terms of where you see manufacturing going. So we've seen from the Barbados viewpoint, they've identified this sector that is, it allows for actually a very, very high value adding activity, and it carries with it a certain risk, but a promise of a certain return. What do you see as a possible direction? And I guess I'll start with Trinidad, seeing that you presented second. So Dr. Ramdeen, if you could.
Sure, no problem, Mr. Bailey. Well, first of all, let me say that I'm a firm believer in manufacturing in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, we hear the government of Trinidad and Tobago talk about diversification, and this has been one of the most bastard words that have been branded about for years in Trinidad and Tobago. And as long as we have energy in Trinidad and Tobago, and as long as the energy sector is doing relatively well, we will only have a talk about diversification with no meaningful impetus coming from those who can make it happen. But from a TTMA perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, from a private sector driven perspective, we believe in manufacturing. We believe we're very competitive at the factory gate. Is the inefficiencies that happen outside of the factory gate, between the factory gate and at the retail level, that erodes the competitiveness of manufacturing for the most part. So border agencies, custom, bureau of standard, congestion, crime on the road, all these different things. And some of the things Mr. Mahfood spoke about, the external factors like shipping costs, increased shipping costs. Yes, I identify opportunities there. And he has identified some opportunities, and we saw some import substitution and those kind of opportunities presenting itself as well. So I'm saying all that to say there is a scope and there's a place and there's an opportunity for manufacturing from a Trinidad and Tobago perspective. We still have some comparative and competitive advantages. We need to fix certain fundamentals to ensure that those inefficiencies that exist do not erode the advantages that we have. Because as I said, for the factory gate, we can produce very efficiently and effectively to compete, at least regionally, if not in some instances, hemispherically as well. We produce very high quality, high standard goods, not just in Trinidad, in the entire Caribbean region. Goods in Jamaica, goods in Barbados, goods in Suriname, goods in Trinidad and Tobago find themselves in the European market, find themselves in the North American market. And the only way they can do that is if they meet a very high standard and quality. and there's demand. I'm seeing demand growing for some of our products, not just from the diaspora market. So there is opportunities. There are opportunities. There continue to be hope. And from what I'm seeing practically with regards to export levels, we're seeing that is happening. We need to grasp the opportunities with both hands.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Mahfoud, could you weigh in on this? What do you see as the vision? What sort of sectors, what sort of high value adding potential is there from your viewpoint?
I think unlike Barbados, we have not specifically identified a specific sector that we believe we have a competitive advantage or one that we think will lead us to huge increases in exports. Okay. However, the way that Jamaican manufacturers had historically looked at exports was that they looked first to North America and they looked at the large Jamaican population in North America and the other Caribbean islands, and their numbers vary as to what the population is, but you know, potentially 1 million or so persons of Jamaican descent. And the focus has been on exporting to a selected or a few number of distributors in North America who deal in Caribbean and ethnic products. There is some opening up of the mainstream supermarkets in North America. However, the issue is that the mainstream supermarkets allocate a relatively small amount of space to Jamaican and Caribbean and other Caribbean products in their supermarkets. They might have 24 feet in a supermarket. So typically it's becoming more and more difficult for Caribbean exporters of food items and sauces and so on to get onto the supermarket shelves. And so what I have been encouraging our members is to really start looking at the Caribbean as the market and not only the US. And I think there is an opportunity to significantly increase the trading in the Caribbean between the different islands and territories. That's where our focus is, and that's where I believe the growth can come from. The other thing that I think we're beginning to touch on, and it is that, you know, during COVID time, consumers changed their way of buying. They changed from going to restaurants and bars, and they stayed at home, they cooked their own meals, and that created a different type, and in terms of purchasing, they purchased online. And there was a huge increase in the number in the transactions, online transactions. And so much so that people in the manufacturing sector in the Caribbean would recognize there was a shortage of cardboard because so much of it was diverted to the online business. So I don't think we in the Caribbean recognize this huge potential to sell on the various online companies, whether it's Amazon or Walmart or various Caribbean online companies. The shipping costs through the couriers have come down a lot. So you either can ship directly from the Caribbean markets to consumers who order online, or you can ship your goods to the inventory warehouses of these places. And I believe that it allows smaller companies in the Caribbean to compete with companies in the US for the consumers who are out there and have changed their buying habits. So I don't want to underestimate the potential for this area, and we and the Jamaica manufacturers have been encouraging this, have been training manufacturers to learn to sell online, and Amazon themselves have put on seminars in Jamaica with a view to increasing the number of online sellers from the Caribbean. So that's my take: increased trading with the rest of the Caribbean, and look at the potential for online selling.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm still looking for questions from the audience, but that's great for me because I have questions of my own, so I get to ask my own questions. I have two quick questions for Therese and for Mr. Hill. Ms. Licha, you've seen the vision of Barbados, and you've seen something of the manufacturing setup there. What would you say to them from the perspective of your research? And just really quick, what
in terms of their life sciences and their biotechnology that they're trying to move forward with, I would say it's good that they're doing that. I would say from my research that they need, if they're building this, look at avenues where they could create that circular approach when they're doing their manufacturing, and set up their businesses in such a way where they could create like a group of businesses. So they have the opportunity to do this from scratch. It's not existing fully. So they could actually develop something that actually has off branches from biotechnology and life sciences. So it's something they need to consider when they're doing their design.
Pretty awesome, thank you. And Mr. Hill, I have a quick question for you. Could you comment on the Caribbean vision, the integration of what you're doing with the rest of the region? Are there synergies? Are there things? I mean, what is the potential for collaboration with perhaps manufacturing or services in other parts of the Caribbean? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thanks for that question. In a real sense, we're right now doing a lot of in-depth collaboration with both Guyana and Suriname. Okay. Part of the vision in terms of that whole bio base, we have this goal of getting to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And so while we're using solar, there are wind projects in the pipeline to get us there, we're also looking at biomass. So Guyana, for example, we'll be doing an off-take arrangement with Guyana for a lot of biomass to come in and use that to help drive the manufacturing. So it ties back to the eco-industrial park model that Ms. Lee Chang was talking about. And that also is part of how we fix our supply chain as well. So as we are shortening supply chain, just moving in shorter directions where we're getting broad-based value, and then they're taking back in goods and services. So where they're bringing up bulk products, we're sending back down value-add products and stuff like that into these particular spaces. These are growing economies. They're growing at 20% per annum. Guyana is forecast to grow by 40% next year. Suriname is getting ready as well. So we're kind of tightening that bond, tightening that with them. And in the short term, just get business with Guyana right. So as CEO, I'm not going to try to be specialized all over the Caribbean, but when we get it right with Guyana, getting a lot of their fresh fruits into our production processes and stuff, do value add for our traditional sector and then for the scientific. So there's some of the things that you're going to see happening going forward. And then collaborating even more up north with the scientific community up there in Cuba and getting them coming in and participating at that level. So we're being strategic in terms of partnering to help strengthen that muscle and build that scientific capabilities in our manufacturing sector.
Okay, great. And also we can offer Ms. Lee Chan's consultancy service.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Mr. Randing hit on the nail on the head in terms of one of the things that does impact on a lot of regional exports is that sanitary bugbear. So we're building out now about 10 new scientific labs, food science labs, that can offer the region the type of support that they need in terms of dealing with those sanitary and phytosanitary areas.
Okay, great. So on that note, I'm actually getting messages saying that we've gone way over time. It was really interesting to hear the different perspectives and to see the scientific paper in between there. I think it's a great mix really to have. So I thank all of the presenters. You guys were all awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight. And now I'd hand back over to the chair, to Dr. Mohammed. Thank you. And sorry again for going over time, but it wasn't my fault. But we had over time. Good. Doctor, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Henry. Thank you so much for chairing such a diverse panel. And I think what we really appreciated is getting the perspective from Trinidad, from Jamaica, from Barbados, apart from our academic paper. So you really got to chair a very diverse panel and very interesting hearing what you all have to say, especially about manufacturing. And what's coming out again is that we really need to have CARICOM back doing some work. So it blended well with our first session where we had Prof. Prasad and Greg talking. So thank you very much for sharing this session with us. And before I close today's session, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today, for attending. And I'd like to also say, we really do look forward to seeing you tomorrow and for seeing you in our other sessions. We have 2 days of COTE to go again. And tomorrow we'll be looking at the cultural industries, and we'll also be looking at the blue economy. So we are expecting to hear a lot more interesting stuff. So we like very much for you to come back tomorrow, and thanks very much again for being here today. We thank our Dean for her greetings. We thank all our presenters and our chair, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Take care.
Welcome to the 15th Conference on the Economy, COTE, the annual landmark event of the Department of Economics, the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. COTE engages national, regional, and international stakeholders in discussing various themes linked to unique developmental challenges and opportunities experienced by Caribbean economies. COTE 2021 will be held under the theme Accelerating Caribbean Development, Retooling, and Restructuring Caribbean Economies Post-COVID-19 via Zoom. Join us on November 24th to the 26th, 2021 as we discuss retooling and restructuring the Caribbean economies post-COVID-19. You will hear from a wide range of panelists on the following sub-themes: energy and renewable energy, manufacturing, the blue economy, cultural industries, partnering for progress. So come, take this opportunity to socialize and network with leading researchers regionally and internationally as we continue to navigate the new normal. For more information, please visit the Department of Economics COTE webpage or email us cote@sta.uwi.edu.